The rain fell softly over the streets of Athens, washing the dirt from the pavement, but never the struggle from his hands. A skinny boy with dark eyes stood under a flickering streetlight, holding a handful of sunglasses he hadn't sold. His stomach growled, but his mind was somewhere else, dreaming of a game he'd never played, in a world that didn't even know his name. Every night, he ran between cars, between chances, between hope and hunger. No one stopped to see him. No one imagined that this boy, this invisible immigrant without a country, would one day make the world rise to its feet and chant a name they could barely pronounce, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Before he was called the Greek Freak, he was just Giannis, a boy born between two worlds, belonging to neither. The streets of Sepolia were his playground and his battlefield. He learned early that hunger teaches faster than any coach. While most kids went to school with backpacks, Giannis carried a bag full of sunglasses and fake watches, chasing coins instead of dreams. His parents, Nigerian immigrants without citizenship, worked endlessly, yet lived like ghosts, present but unseen. Every sale meant a meal. Every rejection meant another night of empty plates and whispered prayers. But even in the struggle, something burned quietly inside him, a belief that there had to be more. Late at night, he'd stop in front of an old TV shop, staring through the glass at NBA games playing on dusty screens. The rhythm of the court, the echo of sneakers, the light that surrounded the players. It was like watching another planet, a world where pain looked beautiful and struggle had purpose. Years later, when the world started to call him a freak, Giannis would smile, because only he knew what it cost to rise from nothing. Only he knew how many nights he ran home barefoot, clutching his basketball as if it were his only passport. From the streets of Athens to the heart of the NBA, his story became proof that greatness doesn't begin with talent. It begins with faith, sacrifice, and a refusal to break. This is not just a story about basketball, it's a story about belonging, about family, about the invisible ones who dream louder than the world allows. This is the untold story of Giannis Antetokounmpo, the boy who turned struggle into power, silence into roar, and doubt into legacy. If stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and tell us where you're watching from. Because every dream, no matter where it begins, deserves to be seen. Athens was beautiful only from afar. Up close, it was cracked walls, cold air, and streets that forgot the names of the people who walked them. I was one of those people, a boy who belonged everywhere and nowhere. My parents had left Nigeria with nothing but faith and a promise that their children would live a better life. But in Greece, we were invisible. No papers, no rights, no safety. Every knock on the door could be the one that sent us back to a country I had never seen. I remember my father's hands, strong but tired, handing me a box of sunglasses. "Go, Giannis," he'd say softly. "The streets will feed us today." I'd walk from corner to corner, calling out prices, smiling at people who wouldn't look at me. Sometimes I'd sell 2 pairs in a day, sometimes none. Hunger became part of the rhythm. But even then, I found something I could never sell, the fire that started every time I saw a basketball court. At first, it wasn't even a court, just a patch of concrete, 2 poles, and a crooked rim. But to me, it was everything. My brother Thanasis and I played with one ball, torn and fading, our laughter echoing through alleys that usually heard only silence. That court didn't care about passports. It didn't care about papers. It gave me a name long before the world did. Every night I'd come home with cracked shoes and dreams too big for our one-room apartment. My mother would smile anyway, placing a single plate in the middle of the table for all of us to share. "We have each other," she'd say, "and that's enough." She was wrong, but only because I wanted to give her more. One night, while I was selling sunglasses near the bus stop, a man stopped, not to buy, but to ask me a question that would change my life forever. He asked, "Do you play basketball?" I didn't know it then, but that moment was the doorway between who I was and who I'd become. A stranger's question on a cold Athenian night, that's how my real story began. Because sometimes destiny doesn't knock. It whispers in the form of a stranger who sees what the world refuses to. His name was Spyros Veliniatis, but to me that night he was just a man in an old jacket who wouldn't stop staring at my hands. He had noticed the way I moved, the rhythm in my steps as I weaved through people and cars, dodging chaos with balance and speed. While others saw a poor immigrant boy selling cheap sunglasses, he saw something else. Coordination, control, instinct. He looked at me the way no one ever had, not with pity, but with recognition. "Come tomorrow," he said, handing me a card from a local club. I remember staring at the paper like it was a passport to another life. Philathletikos, it said. Just a name, but that name would change everything. That night, I didn't sleep, because for the first time, someone saw me as more than what I was trying to sell. The next day, I showed up early. My shoes were torn, my clothes soaked from the morning rain, but I didn't care. Spyros stood by the court, watching as I picked up the ball for the first time. It felt awkward at first, foreign even. But when I dribbled, something happened. Like every step I'd taken on those cracked streets had been preparing me for this. He laughed. "You move like water," he said. I wasn't strong, I wasn't skilled, but I listened, I learned, and I showed up. Every single day. Spyros became more than a coach. He became my first believer. He'd tell me, "Giannis, basketball isn't about where you're from. It's about where you're willing to go." I held onto those words like a lifeline. But dreams have enemies, and mine was the world around me. While I trained, the reality outside the court didn't change. My family still had no papers. My brothers still went hungry. People still shouted, "Go back home," when they passed us on the street. Every layup I made felt like a rebellion, every rebound, a declaration that I existed. And then one day, Spyros said something that froze me. "You can't stay hidden forever, Giannis. You need to be seen by the world." I didn't know it then, but the next person to see me would open a door I never believed existed, one that led all the way to the NBA. I still remember the sound of that old gym, the squeak of shoes on the floor, the echo of every missed shot, the cold air that bit through the walls. It wasn't glamorous. The roof leaked when it rained, and the basketballs were older than most of us. But to me, it was the palace of possibility. Every drop of sweat felt like proof that I belonged somewhere. Spyros pushed me harder each day. "Again!" he'd shout, "until it becomes your nature." Then one afternoon, after practice, he pulled me aside. His voice was shaking. "Giannis," he said, "someone's coming to see you." I frowned. "Who?" He smiled, that rare, proud smile of his. "An NBA scout." The words hung in the air like thunder, impossible, electric and terrifying. That night, I couldn't eat. I lay awake on the mattress beside my brothers, staring at the ceiling, hearing every tick of the clock. The thought that someone from the NBA, that world behind the glass TVs, was coming to see me. It didn't feel real. I had no papers, no name that mattered, no shoes that fit. But the next morning, I laced up my torn sneakers anyway. The scout arrived quietly. No cameras, no entourage, just a clipboard and a curious stare. He watched me run drills. He watched me miss shots, then make them. He saw me dive for a loose ball, like it was life or death. When practice ended, he said one thing to Spyros. "He's raw, but there's something in him. Something you can't coach." A few weeks later, Spyros called me again. "Giannis," he said softly, "you've been selected for the NBA draft." For a second, I didn't move. I thought I misheard him. Then the world started spinning. But before I could chase that dream, I had to do something I'd never done before. Leave everything I loved behind. My mother cried that night. My father hugged me tighter than ever. I promised them I'd make them proud. But deep inside, I was terrified, because I wasn't just leaving home. I was leaving the only world I'd ever known. The flight ticket felt like a miracle and a curse. From the streets of Sepolia to New York City, the leap was too big for the boy who once couldn't sell sunglasses. When that plane took off, I didn't know if I was flying toward my destiny or away from everything that made me human. When I first stepped off the plane in New York, the air felt heavier, not because of the humidity, but because everything around me was too big to understand. The people moved faster, the lights were brighter, the noise never stopped. I clutched my small duffel bag like it held my entire life, because it did. Inside were the same shoes I'd worn on the cracked courts of Athens, a few shirts, and a promise to my family that I wouldn't come back empty-handed. The first night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my parents, my brothers, and the narrow apartment where we all used to squeeze together on one mattress. I wondered if they'd eaten. I wondered if they were proud. I thought the hard part was over, that crossing the ocean meant I'd finally made it. I was wrong. The next morning, I went to the training facility. Cameras, scouts, reporters, all eyes. Everyone was taller, stronger, louder. I didn't understand most of what they said. When one of them asked where I was from, I hesitated. Greece or Nigeria? Before I could answer, someone laughed. Wherever it is, man, they don't play ball like this over there. That laugh stung more than any foul I'd ever taken. But I remembered Spyros's words. Basketball doesn't care where you're from. So I ran harder. When they shot, I rebounded. When they pushed, I pushed back. By the end of the scrimmage, I wasn't just keeping up. I was standing out. That night, the phone rang. Giannis, my agent said, his voice trembling. You've been drafted. 15th pick. Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee. I had to look it up on a map. I didn't know it yet, but that name, Milwaukee, would become the place where I'd build my empire and my home. The celebration didn't last long. The city was cold, the language colder. I'd walk through the snow to practice, my hands numb, my shoes too thin for winter. I missed the chaos of Athens, the noise, the laughter, the smell of my mother's cooking. Here, everything was quiet, except for the echo of the ball hitting hardwood. In that silence, something grew, not comfort, not fame, but resolve. Because before I could rise, I had to survive. The first time I walked into the Milwaukee Bucks facility, I felt like a kid sneaking into a place where legends lived. The walls were lined with championship photos, jerseys, and faces that seemed carved from stone. Everyone looked bigger, stronger, faster. Their footsteps echoed with confidence. Mine didn't. I could feel eyes on me, curious, judgmental, skeptical. The whispers came fast, just loud enough for me to hear. He's too thin, too raw. He'll never last. They weren't wrong. At least, not yet. My arms were like branches, my frame too light for the game's violence. But my heart, that was something else. They saw weakness. I saw a starting point. The first practice broke me. Every drill felt like drowning. Every sprint tore through my lungs like fire. The contact, the speed, the weight of grown men. It was a different world. When I finally sat down, sweat dripping from my chin, I heard laughter behind me. One veteran shouted, "Welcome to the NBA, kid." Another added, "Don't blink and you might disappear." I smiled quietly, but my chest was burning with something other than exhaustion. It was pride. Because I knew something they didn't, I had already survived worse. After practice, when everyone left, I stayed, alone. I shot until my hands hurt. I ran drills until the janitor turned off the lights. That's when I realized I didn't need to be better than them today. I just needed to improve faster than they expected, Days turned into months. My body began to change. The team nutritionist introduced me to protein shakes. I hated the taste, but I drank them like medicine. Weights felt impossible at first, but Spyros's voice echoed in my mind. Pain means progress. I carried that with me, every rep, every bruise, every drop of sweat. While they saw a rookie struggling to fit in, I was building something they couldn't see. A storm inside my silence. Still, the loneliness was heavier than any barbell. Milwaukee winters were brutal. I'd walk home from practice with my hood up, snow collecting on my shoulders, thinking about my family thousands of miles away. I'd send every dollar I could back to Greece. Some nights, when I couldn't sleep, I'd call Thanasis. We'd talk about our childhood court, the one with no nets and broken rims. I'd tell him, "One day, I'll make it so you'll never have to sell anything on the streets again." He'd laugh. "I know, Gianni. Just don't forget who you are." There were moments when I wanted to quit. My body ached, my mind cracked under pressure, and the city felt colder with every loss. I wasn't playing much, and when I did, I made mistakes. Twitter called me a bust, but I kept reminding myself they didn't know the boy who ran barefoot through Athens chasing dreams no one believed in. They didn't know what hunger teaches. And then came that night. A back-to-back game, long road trip, tired legs. Coach called my name, I checked in. The ball found me near the baseline. Instinct took over. I spun past one defender, jumped higher than I ever had before, and dunked. The crowd gasped, not because of the score, but because no one expected it. Even my teammates turned. "Where did that come from?" one asked. I didn't answer, I just smiled. That single moment didn't make me a star. It made me believe that I could become one. From that night on, everything changed. I still made mistakes. I still missed shots, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Every game was a test of endurance, and I passed by refusing to break. I'd go home sore, bleeding, limping, and wake up, ready to do it again. One morning, a veteran who used to mock me stopped me after practice. He said, "You're different, kid. You don't talk, you just work." I nodded, because words had never been my game. Effort was. I realized something that day. Being the weakest in the room was a gift. It meant there was no one left to fear. It meant the only direction left to go was up. And as I walked out of the gym that evening, snow falling lightly outside, I whispered to myself the same promise I made in Athens. One day, they'll know my name. And when they do, it won't be because I talked about it, it'll be because I earned it. It started with a nickname, the Greek Freak. At first, it felt strange, like a label I didn't ask for but couldn't escape. Reporters said it with awe, fans said it with love, but deep inside, I wasn't sure how to feel. They called me Greek, but for most of my childhood, Greece didn't call me anything at all. I had no citizenship, no papers, no country that claimed me. And now the whole world did. Everywhere I went, the cameras followed. My face on billboards, my name in headlines, my story twisted into something clean, easy to digest. The immigrant who made it, the Cinderella of basketball. They wrote about my wingspan, my strength, my rise. But no one wrote about the fear of becoming more symbol than human. Fame is a bright light, but if you're not careful, it burns. At first, I tried to live up to the name. I pushed my body beyond its limits. I trained like a machine. I smiled through pain. But fame has a way of testing who you really are. Some nights, after games, I'd sit alone in my apartment staring at the headlines. Greek Freak dominates again. Greek Freak unstoppable. No one said Giannis. And slowly, I began to wonder if the world loved the myth more than the man. There was one interview that broke me a little. A journalist asked, "Do you feel more Greek or Nigerian?" I froze, because I wasn't sure how to answer. In Greece, I had been the black kid who didn't belong. In America, I was the foreigner with the hard-to-pronounce name. So I told the truth. I am both, and I am more. That moment spread everywhere. Some people admired it, others mocked it. But something changed in me. I realized that identity wasn't a choice. It was the bridge I had to build myself. If the world was going to give me a name, I'd fill it with meaning. The more I embraced who I was, the more the world tried to test it. My second season hit me like a wall. The fame grew, but so did the pressure. Every game, people expected miracles. When I had a bad night, the headlines were ruthless. The freak falters. I started to feel caged inside the name that had once lifted me. I wasn't a freak. I was a man still learning how to carry the weight of his own story. Then came the racism, sometimes subtle, sometimes not. Online comments, jokes in locker rooms. People questioning my Greekness, asking if I could ever represent a country that hadn't accepted me until it needed to. It hurt. But I'd look at the flag on my jersey and remind myself, this is mine too. I played for every immigrant who ever felt invisible, every kid selling something on the street to feed his family, every name the world tried to erase. I began to find peace in silence. I didn't respond with anger. I responded with work. Every insult became fuel. Every doubt became a rep. By my third season, I wasn't just surviving the league, I was leading it. Fans screamed my name now, not just my nickname. Giannis, Giannis, Giannis. But even success comes with shadows. After one game, I overheard two analysts say, "He's great, but he'll never be that guy." It stuck with me, not because they doubted me, but because I realized they didn't understand what greatness meant to me. To them, greatness was rings, fame, dominance. To me, it was loyalty, humility, purpose. Greatness isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving your spirit right. I began to see basketball differently. It wasn't just about scoring or winning. It was a mirror. Every time I stepped onto the court, I saw the boy I used to be, cold, hungry, invisible. And I played for him. Every dunk was a reminder that pain can be turned into power. Every win was a message to my family back in Greece. We made it. But even with the success, something in me stayed grounded. I still sent money home, still called my mom every night, still thanked God before every game, because I knew how fast everything could disappear. The media loved to talk about my numbers, my stats, my muscles, but not the truth behind them. That truth was discipline. It was nights spent icing sore knees alone in the dark. It was mornings running through empty gyms before sunrise. It was faith that never stopped whispering, even when the world shouted over it. And yet, I wasn't done. There was still more to become, more to prove, more to give. Because the name they gave me, the Greek Freak, wasn't a cage anymore. It was a reminder that the boy who once sold sunglasses on the streets of Athens didn't just survive. He redefined what it meant to belong. It was supposed to be just another day, another workout, another game, another morning of routine. I was halfway through breakfast when my phone rang, my mother's number flashing on the screen. I remember the way her voice trembled. There are moments when you don't need to understand the words. The silence says it all. Giannis, your father is gone. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world around me blurred. The chair, the floor, the light, all gone. It felt like I was falling through air that didn't want to hold me. My father, Charles, the man who taught me how to fight, how to laugh even when there was no reason to, was gone. A heart attack. Just like that. The strongest man I ever knew, gone before I could tell him I'd finally made it. I left practice that day without saying a word. My teammates called after me, but I couldn't hear them. The flight to Greece was quiet, but my mind screamed. Every memory of him flooded in, his hands guiding mine when I sold things on the street, his voice saying, "Always smile," his tired laugh at the end of long days. When I landed, My brothers were waiting. We hugged, but it didn't feel real. In the church, the air was thick with incense and sorrow. My father's casket looked too small for the man who carried us through so much. I remember touching the wood and whispering, "I'll make you proud. I promise." And then I broke. Right there, in front of everyone. The cameras, the fans, the noise, all of it faded until it was just me and him, and the silence between us that would never end. For weeks, I couldn't play. Every time I picked up the ball, it felt heavier. I'd walk into the gym, but the fire that used to guide me was gone. Coach told me to take my time, but time doesn't heal. It only teaches you how to carry the wound. Then one night I was alone at the practice facility. Everyone had gone home. I stood under the lights, spinning the ball in my hands, staring at it like it could answer me, and I whispered, "Why him, God? Why the only man who never stopped believing?" No answer came, just the soft echo of the ball hitting the floor. But in that silence, something inside me stirred. Not anger, not peace, but purpose. I started training again, not for fame, not for trophies, but for him. Every sprint was a conversation. Every shot was a prayer. I imagined him watching, nodding, smiling, the way he did when I was a boy. I realized that my father had never truly left. He was in my discipline, my resilience, my faith. When the season began, I played like I had nothing left to lose, because I had already lost what mattered most. The media said I looked different, stronger, more focused. They called it the next step. They didn't know it was grief turned into momentum. After one game, a reporter asked, "Giannis, who are you playing for?" I looked up and said softly, "For my father." That clip went viral. But to me, it was sacred, because that was the truth. Everything from that moment forward was for him. And when pain becomes your fuel, it can either destroy you or make you unstoppable. Over the next few months, I broke records I didn't even know existed. Triple doubles, career highs, awards, they all came. But none of it filled the hole. I started sending even more money home. I helped build things in his name, schools, community courts, youth programs. Every time a kid in Athens picked up a basketball, I wanted him to feel what I once felt, that even from the shadows, you can rise. The night I won my first MVP, I walked on stage, trembling. The lights were blinding, the crowd roaring. But when they handed me the trophy, all I saw was my father's face. I couldn't stop the tears. I said, "This is for him, for my dad, who made me who I am." The audience stood and clapped, but I wasn't performing. I was grieving in front of the world. That moment didn't heal me. It just reminded me that the best way to honor him wasn't by being the best player. It was by being the best man I could be. He taught me humility, kindness, and faith. And those things weighed more than any trophy. When I left the stage that night, I whispered again, "We did it, Dad." And for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because I was finally strong enough to carry it. After my father's death, the court became both my sanctuary and my battlefield. Every dribble was a heartbeat. Every shot was a whisper of his name. I wasn't chasing trophies anymore. I was chasing peace. But grief has a strange rhythm. Some days it pushes you forward, some days it pulls you under. I learned to live in that balance, to play not for applause but for purpose. And slowly, I began to transform. The world saw my muscles grow, my stats explode, my highlights dominate TV screens. But what they didn't see was the pain behind it. The countless nights I couldn't sleep, the prayers whispered into the dark, the quiet conversations with my father's memory. Pain didn't weaken me, it refined me. By 2019, I wasn't just another player. I was leading a movement. The Milwaukee Bucks, a team that hadn't touched the finals in decades, suddenly believed again. The city that once felt foreign now felt like home. They called me their hope, their heart, their Greek king. I smiled, but I knew what it really meant. They saw their own struggles in mine. When I won my first NBA MVP, the cameras captured the tears, but not the storm behind them. The truth is, I didn't cry because of the award. I cried because I remembered every step that led there. The hunger, the laughter, the loss. I remembered my father, my mother, my brothers. And I realized something deeper. Greatness without gratitude means nothing. So I kept working, harder, smarter. But with success came expectation. Fans wanted more. The media wanted rings. Critics said, he can't win when it matters. It echoed like the old whispers from Athens. Too skinny, too raw, not ready. And I smiled again, because those voices had built me before. They'd build me again. Pressure doesn't create champions. It reveals them. The 2021 season became a test of faith. Injuries hit the team. The critics got louder. Every headline questioned our resolve. When I hyperextended my knee in the playoffs, I felt my season slipping away. I lay on the court, staring up at the lights, thinking, is this it, after everything? The pain was unbearable, but the silence in my soul was worse. For a few nights I prayed, not for healing, but for strength to face whatever came next. And when the doctor cleared me, against every odd, every doubt, I returned to the court like a man possessed. In the finals, we faced Phoenix. The noise was deafening, but my focus was clear. Game after game, I gave everything. Sweat, blood, heart. When Game 6 came, I didn't think about the title, the crowd, or the pressure. I thought about that boy selling sunglasses in Athens, the one who refused to quit. 50 points. 50. When the buzzer sounded, I didn't scream. I fell to my knees. Tears streamed down my face as confetti rained from above. For the first time in years, the silence inside me was gone. That night, I didn't just win a championship. I buried my grief and found my father again. I remember holding the trophy, its gold reflecting the arena lights. The crowd chanted my name, not freak, not myth, but Giannis. And in that moment, I understood what my father had been trying to teach me all along. True victory isn't about proving the world wrong. It's about proving your faith right. After the celebrations faded, I went home. I sat alone, the trophy beside me. I thought about Athens, the small apartment, the laughter of my brothers. I whispered, "We did it, Dad. We finally did it." Then I smiled, not with pride, but with peace. In the days that followed, everyone asked what was next. More rings, more records, more fame, but I had already won something greater. I had learned that a champion isn't defined by the moment he lifts the trophy, but by the moments he chooses to rise when everything falls apart. And so, I kept training, kept giving, kept believing, because even after the world calls you great, you must keep earning your reflection. You must keep honoring the people who built you with your work, your humility, and your heart. After the championship, the city of Milwaukee didn't just celebrate, it transformed. Murals appeared overnight. Kids wore my jersey in places where hope once felt like a rumor. And every time I walked through the streets, people didn't see an athlete. They saw a story. But I didn't want my story to end with a trophy. Trophies collect dust. Legacies feed souls. I remembered the streets of Sepolia, the smell of bread from distant bakeries, the sound of coins clinking in my pocket as I sold sunglasses and watches. There were still boys there, nameless, hungry, unseen, chasing the same dream I once whispered into the night. I wanted them to feel what I felt the first time I touched a basketball, that sudden electric belief that life could be more. So I went back, not as the Greek freak, but as Giannis, the son of Charles and Veronica. When I returned to Greece, I didn't announce it to the media. I walked through Sepolia quietly, hoodie up, same streets, same corners. The kids didn't recognize me at first, and that made me smile. I saw them playing barefoot with a broken ball, laughing like we used to. I joined them. We played until the sun set. When I left, I gave them new balls, new shoes. But more than that, I gave them a promise. I told them, "You're not invisible. You matter." Soon after, I built something that would last. A foundation, the Antetokounmpo Academy. It wasn't just for basketball. It was for education, mentorship, and faith. Because greatness without kindness isn't greatness at all. I wanted to create a space where kids didn't need to choose between surviving and dreaming. Back in Milwaukee, I continued giving. Hospitals, schools, food drives, not for publicity, but for gratitude. People think giving is about money, but it's not. It's about remembering where you came from and refusing to close the door behind you. For me, legacy was never about what I owned. It was about who I lifted. In 2024, I received the NBA Cares Community Assist Award. They said it was for my impact on and off the court, but I didn't see it that way. I saw it as a small return on a massive debt, a debt to every person who believed in me when I had nothing. To Spyros, the coach who saw more than poverty. To my mother, who fed us when there was barely food. To my brothers, who kept faith alive even when the lights went out. And to my father, who gave his heart so that ours could keep beating. I used the moment to say something that surprised everyone. "I'm not a superstar," I said. "I'm a work in progress, and that's the point. Progress inspires more than perfection ever will." The room went silent. Because in a world obsessed with glory, I was reminding them that humility is also power. As the years passed, I started investing beyond basketball. I built housing in Athens, funded scholarships, opened gyms where kids could train for free. I also launched a clothing line with my brothers, not to get richer, but to build something together as a family. Every label carried one word stitched on the inside: believe. Because that was the thread that had carried us through it all. I realized then that the truest legacy isn't made of gold. It's made of hands that reach back. One afternoon, after a practice in Milwaukee, a young fan approached me. He couldn't have been more than 10. He said, "Giannis, I want to be like you." I smiled and knelt beside him. "Don't be like me," I said. "Be like the person who believes in you." He looked confused, but one day he'll understand, because belief, not talent, not fame, is what turns stories like mine into movement. Legacy, I learned, isn't about the moments the cameras capture. It's about the ones they don't. The quiet acts of kindness, the hours of mentorship, the hand extended when no one's watching. That's the part of success no one can measure. Now, when I walk into an arena and hear my name echo across the stands, I don't think of glory. I think of my father's laugh, my mother's prayers, and the dusty streets of Athens. I think of that little boy who sold sunglasses and dared to dream. And I whisper, "You did it, but don't stop now. Because legacy isn't about reaching the top, it's about what you build while climbing, and who climbs with you. Fame has a way of changing the air around you. The more people cheer your name, the harder it becomes to hear your own thoughts. For a long time, I believed that peace would come after victory, that if I worked hard enough, won enough, gave enough, I'd finally rest. But peace doesn't live in the noise of achievement. It hides in the quiet after it. After the championship, after the awards, after the parades, the noise stopped. And in that silence, I finally heard myself again. For the first time, I realized how heavy I had been carrying the world. Greece, Nigeria, Milwaukee, my family, my fans, my grief, every identity, every expectation, every promise, all of it on my shoulders. Success gives you everything, except rest. There was a day late in the off-season when I sat alone in the gym after everyone left. The lights were off, except for the faint glow from the scoreboard. I had my head in my hands, drenched in sweat. I had everything I once dreamed of. Fame, fortune, respect. and yet something inside felt empty. Then I remembered what my father once told me when I was just a boy. Giannis, the day you stop being grateful is the day you start falling. Those words hit me differently now. Gratitude, not goals, was the reason I had survived so much. Somewhere along the way, I had turned purpose into pressure, so I began to slow down, to listen more, to play for joy again, not fear. I returned to the court one morning with no cameras, no crowd, just me, a ball, and an echo. I dribbled in rhythm, not chasing records, just feeling the bounce, the sound, the breath. For the first time in years, basketball felt like prayer again. I had carried the weight for so long that I forgot it was allowed to be light. That season, I played differently, not harder, freer. Reporters said I looked calmer, mature, in control. But the truth was simpler. I had stopped trying to prove myself. When you stop fighting for approval, you start living with intention. One night after a game, I met a young player from another team. He asked, "How do you deal with all the pressure?" I smiled and said, "By remembering that basketball is what I do, not who I am." He nodded slowly, and I saw something click in his eyes, the same way it once clicked in mine. Faith became my anchor. Every morning I prayed, not for wins but for peace. Every night I thanked God for giving me more than I deserved, because I knew what it felt like to have nothing, and that memory, that hunger, that humility was my protection against pride. There was one game that season where I played terribly. Missed shots, turnovers, frustration. Reporters surrounded me afterward, waiting for excuses. I just laughed and said, "I'm human. Today wasn't mine. Tomorrow might be." They called it maturity, but really it was freedom. When you stop fearing the fall, you finally learn how to fly. Off the court, I started spending more time with my family. Mariah and the kids grounded me in ways no arena ever could. My sons didn't care about my stats. They cared if I came home in time for dinner. They reminded me that the most important title I'll ever have isn't MVP. It's Dad. One evening I was tucking my oldest son into bed when he asked, "Dad, were you scared when you were poor?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "Yes," I said softly, "but being scared doesn't mean you stop. It just means you keep going anyway." He smiled and said, "Then I'll keep going too." That was the moment I knew my legacy was safe. Not in trophies or highlights, but in the lessons that would outlive me. As the years went by, I found myself reflecting more than training. I'd visit my father's grave in Athens and sit there quietly, sometimes for hours. No cameras, no entourage, just me talking to the man who built my spirit. I'd tell him about my family, about the kids I'd helped, about how his lessons still guided me, and every time I left, I felt lighter. Because I understood now. The weight I had carried, the pressure, the expectations, the name, the grief, wasn't a curse. It was the proof of love, of growth, of purpose. And once I stopped trying to escape it, it became the very thing that set me free. When people ask me today what it means to be the Greek freak, I smile. Because it's no longer about strength or speed or records. It's about grace. It's about faith. It's about remembering that no matter how high you climb, you never forget the ground that raised you. And as long as I keep that truth close, I know I'll never fall, because my father, my family, and my faith will always lift me higher than any trophy ever could. There comes a moment in every athlete's life when the applause starts to fade, not because people stop cheering, but because you stop needing it. For me, that moment came quietly, not after a championship, not after a record, but one ordinary afternoon in Milwaukee. I was sitting at a park, watching my sons play basketball with neighborhood kids. No cameras, no fans, just laughter, sweat, and the sound of sneakers scraping the pavement. The same sound that once echoed through my childhood in Sepolia. For the first time, I saw my story repeating, not as pain, but as joy. I had spent years chasing greatness. Now I just wanted to pass it on. Fatherhood changed everything. It slowed me down in the best way. When my son fell while trying a layup, I didn't rush to help. I watched him get up. I smiled, because that's what my father did for me. He let me fall so I could rise. At home, the trophies sat untouched on the shelves. My kids used my MVP plaques as ramps for their toy cars. I didn't stop them. I wanted them to see that success is something to play with, not something to worship. At dinner, we'd talk about gratitude, not fame. I'd tell them, you don't have to be the best. Just be better than you were yesterday. In public, people still saw the superstar. But behind the spotlight, I was just another man learning patience, learning balance, learning how to love without fear of loss. The same drive that once fueled my rise now guided me toward purpose, mentoring, teaching, building. When the game gave me everything, I realized my duty was to give it back. I began visiting schools and youth centers, not just to talk about basketball, but about belief. I told the kids what no one told me when I was their age, that it's okay to be scared, to fail, to start small. Don't chase being famous, I'd say. Chase being useful. They listened, not because I was an NBA star, but because I spoke like someone who had lived their struggle. I mentored young players in the league too. Some came to me for advice on pressure, others on humility. I'd tell them, fame is a mirror. It shows you who you already are, not who you want to be. If you're grounded, it will reflect strength. If you're lost, it'll reflect emptiness. They'd nod, but I could see in their eyes that the lesson would only make sense after they'd walked through their own fire. Off the court, I started doing what my father never had the chance to, building permanence. A foundation for my kids' future, a school in Greece, a basketball academy in Nigeria, because roots matter. No matter how high you climb, your roots feed your sky. And the more I gave, the more I understood. The man I became wasn't defined by what I achieved, but by what I restored. Dignity, hope, and connection. One evening during a charity event, an old man approached me. He said, "Giannis, do you realize you've become what you once needed?" I didn't know how to respond. I just smiled because maybe that's what life is. Becoming the person you once prayed would find you. Greatness fades, goodness echoes. There are days when I still wake up before dawn, tie my shoes, and head to the gym. Not because I have to, but because I want to remember where it all started. The sound of the ball, the smell of sweat and hardwood, the feeling of being no one. I need that humility to stay human. Sometimes younger teammates ask me, "Why do you still train so hard? You've already won everything." And I tell them, because discipline isn't about what you win. It's about who you become when no one's watching. As I grow older, the noise around me fades more each year, but the silence feels right now. I don't fear the end of my career because I know what comes next. Life beyond the game. A life filled with family dinners, morning runs, community projects, and the peace that comes from knowing I gave everything I had. When I step away from basketball, I don't want people to remember the stats. I want them to remember the story. A boy with nothing who gave everything, a man who learned that power means nothing without kindness, and a father who finally became the anchor he once needed. Because beyond the game, beyond the fame, beyond the nickname, I'm still that kid from Athens, still holding on to the same belief that every struggle carries a seed of strength. And every name, no matter how hard to pronounce, deserves to be heard. When my sons ask about my career, I won't show them trophies. I'll show them scars. And I'll say, these are the proof that I never stopped trying, even when it hurt. That's the story I want to leave behind. Not just the rise, not just the wins, but the man I became when the cheering stopped. The arena is quieter now, the lights still shine, but they don't blind me anymore. I've learned to see past the flash, past the noise, past the headlines, past the trophies, because somewhere along the way, I stopped chasing the game and started living beyond it. When I walk into a gym these days, the sound that used to thrill me, the bounce of the ball, the roar of the crowd, now feels different. It feels sacred. Every echo reminds me how far I've come and how far others still need to go. Basketball gave me a platform, but life gave me purpose. Cliffhanger 1. The real victory was never the ring. It was learning who I was when I took it off. After years of endless noise, I found joy in silence. I began spending mornings watching the sunrise instead of highlight reels. I'd hold my son's hand, feel the world breathe around me, and realize this is what peace feels like. I used to think greatness meant being remembered. Now I know greatness means being useful while you're here. I still train, not because I have to, but because movement is prayer. Every step, every breath, every repetition connects me back to that boy in Sepolia, the one who ran barefoot, chasing hope down broken streets. I whisper to him sometimes, "We made it, but never forget where we started." When I visit Athens now, the same neighbors who once ignored us greet me with pride. They say, "You gave our children faith again." And I smile, not out of ego, but gratitude, because if my story can open one door for another kid who feels unseen, then everything was worth it. Cliffhanger 2. I realized that my real team was never just the Bucks. It was everyone who ever believed when the world didn't. In interviews, people often ask me, "Giannis, what's next?" And I tell them, legacy is what's next. Not the kind they carve on trophies or print on magazine covers, but the kind written in the hearts of others. I've seen what money and fame can buy. It can buy time, comfort, opportunity, but not peace. Peace is earned through giving, through forgiveness, through remembering that the story isn't about you. It's about everyone you touch along the way. So I keep building. I help fund new community centers in Greece and Nigeria. I invest in schools where kids learn not just sports, but discipline, empathy, and leadership. I want them to know that being a champion means lifting others, not standing above them. Sometimes I still hear my father's voice when I'm alone. "Giannis, never forget. The world will test your strength, but only you can test your character." Those words have become my compass. Every decision, every partnership, every speech begins there. Because strength wins games, character builds empires. Cliffhanger 3. And in the end, legacy isn't about power, it's about peace. Now, when I look at my reflection, I don't see the Greek freak. I see a man molded by struggle, shaped by love, and sustained by faith. The boy who once begged the world to see him now chooses to see the world instead. Sometimes before bed, I take my sons out to the backyard and we play under the night sky. The grass cool beneath our feet, the stars reflecting on their eyes. And I tell them stories, not about the NBA, not about fame, but about courage, about kindness, about a man named Charles who taught me that greatness begins in the heart. They listen quietly, the way I once did. And in their laughter, I hear my father again. When I close my eyes, I see all of it. The cracked courts of Athens, the cold gym in Milwaukee, the confetti falling from the rafters, the smiles of children holding basketballs in places where dreams once seemed impossible. And I think, maybe this was the plan all along. Maybe every setback, every wound, every loss was preparing me for something far bigger than basketball. Because now I understand, I was never meant to just play the game. I was meant to change what the game means. The world will one day move on. New stars will rise. New names will echo through arenas. And when that happens, I won't be sad. Because I know I left more than highlights. I left hope. I left proof that the boy who sold sunglasses on the streets of Athens could one day light up the world. Not with talent alone, but with heart. As I walk out of the empty arena one last time, The lights dim behind me. I pause at center court, take a deep breath and smile. The journey wasn't perfect, but it was real. And maybe that's what people will remember most, that even giants start small, that even legends fall, and that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won in stadiums, but in silence. Because when the ball stops bouncing and the noise fades, all that's left is the man and the story that lived beyond the game. Join Beyond the Game. Real stories, real heart. Subscribe now.